webinar. So I don't even know. I've got it open, but I don't even know if you need it open. So can you just see just the presentation?
Yeah.
So even like that, where it is, like you say, quite small, it looks okay on the screen.
Yeah. Yep, it does.
I've not got it on the other screen, that's the thing, which is fine.
I might turn mine off because it's a bit distracting, actually.
My mouse, the keyboard isn't working though, that's the only thing. Oh, right, I have to click on the presentation.
Because I think I'll end up looking at it and I don't want to look at it. So I think I'll put you down. Actually, I might put this over here for now. Do I look okay brightness-wise?
Yeah, fine.
What if I switch this off? A bit dark.
Better on. Not too dark, but it's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, somebody waiting in the lobby. That's a good sign. You still use that colour wow stuff?
Yeah.
I've got some. I've not used it for ages. I didn't have time this morning, and now I'm just like, oh my god, it's just so fluffy. I put like loads of conditioner in it, but
I used the extra strength one because I didn't find that the normal one was very good.
Oh really?
So
I didn't know there was an extra.
Yeah, there's an extra strength one, so that's quite good.
Oh right, okay. I did notice actually on, when it was Amazon Prime last week, it was like half price.
My hairdresser sent that link to me actually.
I nearly sent it to you, to be fair, as well. But I was gonna get some, but I was just like, I've not really been using it, so I don't have the time, and I hate, especially when it's been warm, I can't cope with drying my hair because just end up like just hot and sweaty, so we're just leaving it to dry. But then obviously it goes fluffy and whatnot. So
somebody's invited a note taker to come along.
Say again?
Somebody's note taker is in the lobby.
What does that mean?
Yeah, read AI meeting notes has also come along.
All right, interesting. Well, there's only 7 in the lobby, are we?
We'll just wait a few minutes. Okay. Well, not a few minutes, like 2 minutes. One.
When I was on a webinar, which I thought was going to be like about the employment rights bill on Tuesday, it's half an hour, Bratcher's bite-sized one. 27 minutes of it was him just talking about case law. 3 minutes was literally him talking about the employment road bill, which was nothing new. It's what I'd already seen and done a post on LinkedIn myself, so that was a bit annoying. But when you first joined and you were waiting in the lobby, and it kept saying, oh, webinar will start soon, but you could see him flicking through the slides because I was like, what's going on? And it was like all the slides were like going like this.
Oh, wow.
It's funny. Oh, Robert McKenzie, isn't he the one that's meant to be on the training next week?
Oh,
that we've cancelled.
Oh yeah, but did it not take him about 12 months to book on?
Oh, I must admit, when he did finally book on, I said to Rachel, I'm not particularly looking forward to meeting him because he just seems like weird. Right, are we doing this?
Let's do it.
Admit
right,
all,
so yeah? I'm going to minimize you then, and I'm just looking at my notes.
Yeah. Oh, shit. Yeah. Admit all, ready?
Yep. Hi, everyone. Well, you can't say hi back, to be fair.
You can wave if you've got your camera on.
Yeah, We don't mind if you are not got your cameras on and you would like to have your lunch at the same time. No problem at all to us. But thank you very much for joining our webinar today. So this is From Hire to High Performer, Mastering Onboarding. And it's going to be delivered today by Lizzie and I. So I am Liz Chiver and I'm the Director of Halliday's HR. And this is my colleague, Lizzie Walsh, and she is our HR business partner. So I think quite a few of you will recognise our faces, some clients, some not clients, but maybe been on our webinars before. So I run a HR training and recruitment consultancy called Halliday's HR. We're based in Stockport, but we do have clients all the way across in the Northwest, some a little bit further afield actually as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about us as we go through and towards the end. Just to let you know that we are recording today's webinar and that we will be sharing that with you after the webinar is finished, along with a copy of the slides. And you've probably already noticed that we have turned your microphone off. Your cameras are enabled if you want to have them on. Like I said before, if you want to have them off and you'd rather that, that's absolutely fine with us as well, whatever you feel most comfortable with. We have activated the chat function. So if you've got any questions or anything as we go through, then Lizzie's going to be manning that as we go through, or we can just cover all questions at the end. That potentially might be a little bit easier. Okay, so just looking at the agenda then for the next kind of maybe half an hour, 45 minutes, something like that. So won't take too much of your day. But what we're going to be looking at is what is onboarding. So what, the 4 phases of the onboarding process, what to include in your onboarding process, and then some of those common pitfalls to avoid. So first up then, why does onboarding matter? So I guess onboarding may be the second phase of the employee life cycle, but it is one of the most important because it can have that long-term effect on both employee and organizational success. So, having that effective onboarding, it offers so many benefits. So it obviously offers increased job satisfaction, reduced stress, improved productivity, and it just helps, those new hires to feel welcomed. It helps them to understand their role within the business and how they fit in with what you're trying to achieve. And it also helps them to kind of build those relationships within the company as well. So, overall, having that really positive start to employment that can lead to that whole, these buzzwords, I guess, around greater employee retention, greater engagement. But ultimately, it does have a benefit to both the individual and the organization. And just to give you a couple of stats then. So a study from the Brandon Hall Group found that great onboarding can boost employee retention rates by upwards of 82%. And according to the HR magazine, over half, so 54% of employees reported being dissatisfied with their onboarding experience, and up to 23% of those left within the first year. So really does have a significant impact and is worth working on this stuff. Okay, so let's have a look at, why should we kind of have that, what is onboarding in a bit more detail. So it refers to the process in which new hires are integrated into the business. So essentially, the key objectives of that are to facilitate the new employee's ability to contribute to the new role, to increase the new employee's comfort level in that new role, to reinforce the decision to join your business. So to, to let them know that they've made a great decision by joining you. It enhances productivity, as we previously mentioned, and obviously encourages that commitment and that employee engagement. So, the primary goals really are to familiarize the new person with the company culture, the values, the ways of working, so how you do things, and really just to prepare and to ensure that they're prepared to perform their role effectively. And it does involve a series of steps that are designated to making that new employee feel welcomed and ready to contributing. So we're going to talk through those today, but typically there are 4 stages of that onboarding process. So that first one is all about pre-boarding. Then there's orientation, there's training, and there's integration. And like I say, we'll dig into each one of those in a bit more detail. But part of that, the tasks that make up onboarding, it often includes things like completing paperwork, setting up technology, communicating expectations and those organizational structures, along with that whole kind of softer feel of, making that new colleague feel welcomed. So in terms of, I guess, kind of time frames and, how long should an onboarding process last? It's anywhere from, 4 to 8 weeks, really. And, after that initial period, it's kind of important to have some of those more long-standing processes so that, the employee does know what's going to be happening and feels fully integrated into the business. So I mentioned that there are 4 phases of the onboarding process. So as I mentioned, so phase 1 is that pre-boarding. So this is before your employee starts. Phase 2 is the orientation. So this is, their first day of work and that first week on the job. Then phase 3 is all about the training. So this is after their first week of work. And then phase 4 is the integration. So this is after, those 4 to 8 weeks. And I'm just going to talk through each of those in a little bit more detail. So first up then, phase 1, that pre-boarding. Okay, so as I guess it's reasonably self-explanatory, but it basically involves preparing for that new hire's arrival and ensuring that they feel welcomed before their first day. So it might involve things like, sending welcome emails, completing any necessary paperwork that can be done up front, making sure that they've got technology set up, and also preparing the workplace. It's so that, it's really crucial to make sure that that new hire feels valued and excited about joining the team. It can be a really long time sometimes where, where somebody has got the job before them starting. So they might have a notice period of a month, 3 months, 6 months in some cases. So, keeping those touch points and keeping them warm and excited during that time can have a really good kind of engagement and motivation prior to them starting, and also means that there's going to be less chance of them dropping out of the process or accepting another job in the meantime as well. So in terms of what that might look like to you and the type of things that you might think about before somebody starts with you, first of all, it's those formalities. So have all the contractual formalities been taken care of? Have they got a contract of employment? Have you done the references? All of that kind of stuff. But also, other things like, do they know what they need to wear? Have you got a work dress code? Have you got any kind of, you might have a uniform that they might have. Have you given them in advance? Can you do that? Is it all ready? Do you know their measurements and all of those types of things? Any important information? So does the new employee know when and where to arrive? And do they know the essentials of what to expect? So, ideally, the thinking is that, you know, that they should know where to go. Do they know where to park? Do they know who to ask for at reception? Do they know where reception even is? And what does their first day look like? If you can kind of, even if you create their first day, or if you can create their first, the whole onboarding even up front and give them those details, it puts them a little bit at ease and in terms of, what to expect, and to feel confident that they're not going to go into the workplace and it's going to be absolute chaos. And nobody knows they're coming, and nobody knows they're just going to be sat twiddling their thumbs. That it's a really professional and expected kind of delivery of the onboarding. So just in terms of colleagues then, so just making sure that all colleagues involved in the process are given the necessary information that they need. So it might be that you've roped in a few different people to kind of help, maybe with mentoring or to show people around on their first day. But making sure that they're aware of who's coming, what the job is that they're coming to do, and also what you expect of them in terms of what they should be covering with those particular people and how long they've got to do it and where they should be doing it. Okay, in terms of arrival, so you want that new employee to arrive in the business on their first day to a fully functioning workplace. So, just making sure that, everything is in place, it's all organized, it's slick, it's professional, and, having those things well in advance really helps. In terms of meetings, so you might invite the new colleague to any upcoming meetings that you've got, and if possible arrange appointments with important people so that they'll be that potentially they'll be interacting with. So again, that can go as part of the planning, but really thinking about the people that that'll be crucial for them to have a conversation with, to really kind of understand in their department and outside of their department, perhaps with suppliers even, or clients, different team members, senior managers, all of those types of things. Who do you want them to meet to get a full picture of what exactly goes on within the business? And then from a training point of view, are you able to assess up, in advance whether that new starter needs any additional training in any particular area? So you might have specific systems that you work with, maybe, I don't know, a HR system, or you've got some kind of, finance system, or anything you've got that could be booked in ahead of time. So not that they're doing the training in their own time, but so that it's all planned and so that it isn't delayed. And so it can be, again, very slick so that they are fully performing in as short of time as possible. The role responsibilities. So sometimes a new employee might be coming into a position that didn't previously exist. So potentially responsibilities will have been redistributed. So, just make sure that the team leader is responsible for communicating this to kind of current employees, and just how that's occurred and how it's going to play out and where this new employee will fit, so that there's not any awkward conversations or uncomfortable scenarios once your new employee does start. And then finally, I guess just thinking about, is it appropriate to send a welcome gift? So, some people we've worked with in the past have maybe sent things a few weeks or months in advance, where they've maybe sent a little notepad out. It might be personalized, a mug, something to say that, we're really excited about you joining the company, and here's a little welcome gift. Or it might be that you plan to do that on their first day. You could maybe decorate their desk, for example, or put a balloon there, or just put a little cake or some chocolates and a card signed from the rest of the team. Little gestures like that, really, really help new starters to feel at ease and welcomed, and part of the team really from the off, and even, before they get started. One thing, I guess, just in addition to that, we have also known and encouraged, I guess, clients and other people that we work with that, if you've got, maybe you might have team building activities or team days that are happening in the run up to somebody joining the business. It's really a nice idea to get those people involved in those, and to come along, even if it's just from the social aspect. It just makes that, again, that commitment, that engagement, it encourages that. And again, it's not so daunting on their first day. Okay, so that's that first phase then. So let's look at the second phase. So this is all about the orientation. So this basically covers the new hire's first day and their first week. So it includes welcoming that new employee, potentially offering a tour of the office, making introductions, and conducting those initial kind of training sessions. But I guess the goal of this orientation phase is to make that new hire feel as comfortable as possible and part of the team from the start. So, I mean, some of this might be obviously what you will think about in phase one when you're doing your prep side of things. But, think about on that first day, what time is going to be appropriate for that person to join. If you start at 9 o'clock and you have your new hire coming in at 9 o'clock, potentially it's going to be a bit chaotic. You're potentially going to be quite stressed because you've got to juggle a lot of different things, making sure that you've got dealing with your new employee, but also having your team meeting, checking your emails, all of that stuff, and potentially you won't have that kind of focused time with that new starter. And it might be a little bit chaotic, like I mentioned. So can they start potentially an hour later, come in at 10, come in at 11? Just on that first day does make a lot of difference to give you a bit of breathing time. The welcoming culture. So, think about it from their shoes. What are they going to experience when they first come into the business? And how can you make that as welcoming as possible? So is there somebody to meet them on reception? Or if you don't have reception, how are they going to get hold of you? Have they got a mobile number that they can call and that you'll go down and meet them? Make them a coffee, get them a snack or a biscuit. If it's breakfast time, a nice thing to do is kind of go to a meeting room, have a little bit of breakfast together, have a coffee, get to know each other a little bit, maybe on a personal level, and just break the ice a little bit and make them feel like they're at home, and it's not those kind of awkward scenarios where you just kind of sat looking at each other. In terms of introductions as well, so that it's can be a nice thing to do, I guess, ahead of when this person starts to, like we said, circulate some kind of email or message around to the company mentioning that a new joiner is going to be joining. So you're going to have a new employee, what they're doing, all of that kind of stuff. But then on the day, it's quite nice to give that little bit of a reminder. You might even do, you might even circulate something which is a bit of an, about you type document, which is maybe a photograph, a little bit of blurb about who they are, what they like doing in their spare time, but also encouraging them to say, do you know what, they're new to the business, why don't you go and say hi? And that, they're not in that scenario where they're walking around the business potentially and somebody's looking at them going, oh my God, who the hell is that? Who are they? And there's whispers and that type of thing. It's, it makes it much easier for that new hire to get settled in. Okay, so phase 3 then. So this is the training stage. And this is, obviously training is an ongoing process, and it does include kind of that it's role specific training. It might be compliance training, and any other of those kind of additional resources that new hire might need. And your supervisors, your team leaders, your mentors, they all play a really key role in this phase, to ensure that the new employee understands their responsibilities and expectations at this point. So just a few pointers here. So, onboarding context. So, make it clear how things will run over the coming days or weeks, and explain that process fully to the new employee. So, like I said at the very beginning, if you can put together some kind of timetable for what potentially the first 3 months or the first month might look like, then that, is really helpful to kind of set those expectations. Going into expectation setting, so managers should review responsibilities with the employee and communicate their expectations. But just remember that it is that two-way street. So, it is also thinking about, what does the employee expect from the manager and from the business during that time? And are we meeting our expectations as well? First asks, so, the new hires should be integrated into existing projects. So, don't just, I guess, think about having them doing the basic kind of boring stuff. Get them involved in some juicy stuff. Some exciting initial activities can really inspire new employees' enthusiasm for the company. And I guess it can really showcase what their job is going to be all about. So, yes, there are some not so exciting parts of everybody's job, but I guess just really kind of encouraging those. The legal formalities side of things, so obviously there are policies, procedures, and SOPs that will be associated with any new employee's work, but set the expectations in terms of where those can be found. You might want to talk through these to a certain extent, but I think some people can be guilty of, here's a whole employee handbook, for example, just sit in a room for the first day and read all of those policies, and it might take them a few hours and then sign to say you've read them. Potentially that is not the most exciting thing and motivating and engaging thing for a new starter to be doing on their first day. So maybe that's something that can be done in their own time, and you just set those deadlines for when you need those documents completed and signed. But obviously bearing in mind that if they're, potentially if there's health and safety implications, that they might have to sign them before certain activities are performed. Then a company walkthrough. So like we said, in the planning stage, think about, how, what is it going to look like to give that employee a clear picture of what happens within the business, what different departments there are, who's responsible for those different teams, and how they're kind of interconnected, and giving that kind of that real business introduction as well as just to their specific role. And like I say, that goes on to the next point in terms of that business introduction, but give them a feel of, if you work within a manufacturing site, for example, get them walking around the shop floor, get them shadowing somebody in all different departments, in the warehouse, in sales, wherever it might be, so that they can really understand the different steps in the business, and like I say, how their cog fits into that bigger machine. And then another really important one is about them understanding that corporate strategy. So planning in to have that conversation around what the vision is, the mission, the goals, and it's really helpful to have this conversation, if you can, from the business owner or the CEO, somebody at the top that can be really passionate about what they're trying to achieve, and how they kind of fit into that. We've seen that really, really great success with people. It doesn't take very long, in all fairness, but if you can just sit down for half an hour and have those conversations with someone and explain exactly why you do what you do and what your purpose is, has such a big inspiring effect. If you can't do it in person for whatever reason, your business is too big or whatever, then a simple video or something like that is quite a nice way to do it as well. Okay, so on to stage 4 then. So so integration obviously extends beyond the initial weeks, and it then kind of clicks over into those regular check-ins, so those one-to-ones, those feedback sessions, and ultimately I guess those performance reviews. And it's just being aware that, having that continuous support and development, it's still, yes, they're still in a new period, but they still need that time. They're still they are new into the business, and that it isn't, oh, they've completed their first week or their first month and that's it, we'll just forget about them now. It is having those touch points, I guess, where you're getting feedback from how the new hire, so gathering these first impressions, having those two-way conversations around how are you feeling, what is your overall impression of the business, have we met your expectations in terms of what the role is about, is there anything that could be improved, maybe you want to get some feedback on the onboarding process itself, so that you can make it better for the next time, and really encourage that kind of open communication, really. And then also that second point there about follow-up questions. So, ensuring that give them time and space and opportunity to have a conversation with you or with their manager, that allows them to ask any questions. So, reassuring them that, no question is a stupid one, ask anything you want, we won't judge you. And, all we want you to do is to be able to, clarify anything that you're not sure of, so that you can, literally hit the ground running from when you finish your onboarding kind of process. So that's the 4 stages. And unfortunately, I did lie, because there is actually a 5th step. And this final stage, I guess, is that it's more of a temperature check. And it's all about that kind of that ongoing process, that ongoing feedback, and making sure that you touch base with your new starters. It might be that you do a probationary period process, so you might be touching base with them every month anyway. But even after they've successfully passed their probationary period, especially if you only have a 3-month probationary period, making sure that you are touching base regularly still. And that maybe even, that you're encouraging that they, that there is that networking either between different departments, or there might be a number of new starters that all join together. So, perhaps a few weeks down the line, organizing a lunch with everybody or something like that, is also quite a nice thing to do. Okay. So I'm just going to pass over to Lizzie now.
Thank you. So yeah, building an onboarding program, I guess. How do you do all of that, taking into account everything that Liz has just said? What are those steps involved in designing that effective onboarding program? Like we've said, planning a well-designed induction/onboarding program results in that positive first experience of a business. It means that the employee themselves can integrate into the team. They're going to become more productive quicker, and be working to their highest potential. So it's thinking about things like the structure. So, that's going to be able to provide consistency and clarity to them as a new starter, but then also any managers or team leaders that are involved. Thinking about your timings, yourself. So as mentioned, it should start as soon as the offer has been accepted, and think about how you can reinforce that they've made the right decision. Then there's the actual progress, so the only way that you will know if your induction process is effective is to ask those that have just had it. And I guess it's probably going to be a little bit awkward for them to be, within the first couple of weeks asked how did you find your induction? Because they're perhaps going to be a little bit apprehensive at coming back and saying it was rubbish. Hopefully they will do it in a little bit more of a constructive way, but you can hopefully probe, certain elements of, I think with any onboarding program, when you start a new job, it is automatically overwhelming. And, even as a manager, or HR delivering an element of an induction program, it can be quite tiring. So just bearing in mind that yes, there's a lot of information to share, but that you are not necessarily overloading them with absolutely everything on day one. And finally is the different components. So the information that they need to know, the important things, the payday, the pension information, your policies, what benefits they may well be entitled to, what's your culture. But also bearing in mind the information that you need. So if you've not already had things like their P45, their signed contract, making sure that you've got that information. Thinking about the people that they need to meet and who it is that they need to know to be able to do their job effectively. But then also the physical environment. So that's things like the workspace, the toilets, most importantly, where it is they make a brew, but also thinking about the digital environment side of things. So the systems that they'll be using and whether or not there are any training needs there. Because ultimately a first class induction, it's about combining the best experience in the right sequence and through the appropriate medium, whatever that might be. But ultimately ensuring that the various components, they all flow in an engaging sequence of steps that, is going to you're going to set your new starter up to succeed, which is ultimately what you want. They're going to then be kind of on board and doing the day-to-day activities much sooner than perhaps anticipated. But there is nothing worse than turning up for a new job and not even having a desk or a workspace to sit at. So thinking about the desk, the equipment, allocating that area of workspace. Some offices I know, you hot desk, so they may well not necessarily have a same desk every time, but maybe just on day one you could just allocate them their own kind of little safe space to work in. And it goes without saying, making sure it's clean, it's tidy. I remember starting a job once and there was like a mug with like lipstick around it, and it turned out that was the person who I'd replaced, as though it was almost like a parting memory. But just making sure that it's got all the equipment, so a computer or a laptop, charger, keyboard, mouse, if they're going to be using screens, a second screen, a nice chair that's not got, looks like the dog's chewed the arm off it. Looking at the phone, so some companies do still use handsets, so making sure that that's set up. I know some companies you can have your name on the headset, if you've got a certain number, it says that it's your name. So just making sure them kind of light touch things are set up, and even stationery, as daft as it sounds, just putting a couple of pens on the desk or highlighters or whatnot, and making sure that their phone is set up if they've got a mobile, that your IT or whoever has set it up for you, the SIM's in, they've got a mobile number, so they can kind of, once they've gone through their onboarding process, they're pretty much good to go in terms of the day-to-day aspects of their role. Additionally, if you're thinking about the systems that they'll need to be set up on, so access to be able to physically log on to a computer, how they access their emails, whether you use SharePoint or Google Drive, Slack, any of those systems, making sure, Teams, that they've got that access. If you use any online systems, so it might be clock in, clock out, HR system for recording and requesting holidays, making sure that you've created them a profile. Thinking about if they're going to be, as part of their role, claiming expenses, setting them up on that. A training platform, so some companies use a training platform, and some of the initial mandatory training, CyberWise and other kind of mandatory training that's needed is all done online, watching videos, so making sure that they've got access to be able to do that, and of course any job specific systems that they're going to be using. So, apologies, it looks a little tiny. I am going to go through it, but in HR, we love a checklist. But more importantly, it just helps to ensure that nothing is missed. And ultimately, every one of you new starters are getting that same experience. So, an example could look like this, and it is continued on the next slide. So, first up, is that Liz mentioned about that whole welcome and that corporate presentation, if you have such a thing, planning that in. You then might want to consider your company standards and explaining these and just making sure that they understand them. So, are you going to give them access to the employee handbook, or are you just going to signpost them to where it is? Some people store it, it might be on Dropbox, or it might be, you might email it to them, but making sure that they've got access to such a document. Talking about their dress code or appearance, is it that it's quite formal, or do you more dress for your day? Ultimately what that looks like. The hours of work, so yes, they'll have a contract, but do you have core hours? Do you have flexi time? What your overtime arrangements are? Can they just work overtime? Do they have to get it authorized in advance? Thinking about holidays and annual leave, so letting them know what their entitlement is, especially if they've started midway through the year, they'll have that prorated entitlement, but also what the process is for booking holidays and getting those holidays authorised. Pay information, so most importantly, when people get paid, think about as part of that as well. If somebody starts, today, for example, it's mid-month, have they missed cut-off? So are they then not expected to be paid this month? Are they then going to be paid in August? Just letting people know. How they access the pay slips, who it is if you do outsource your payroll, who it is that they need to contact. Are pay slips, are they physically hand delivered? Are they emailed? Or will they be, BrightPay, for example, will they get a login details for that? Things like reporting absence, what is that process? Can they ring and can they send a WhatsApp? Who is it that they need to make contact with? By what time? What information is it that you need them to give? You can also think about medical and dental appointments. What's your stance on that? Legally, there is no time, no right to paid time off for those, but are you kind of saying, well, we'll give you an hour or so in the morning before you start work, just letting them know that. Thinking about smoking and eating, so have you got a designated area for smoking? If so, where is that? Letting them know. If a company, they wear a uniform, are you expected to get changed or put a coat on? Eating, so bearing in mind, I know some clients say that there's no eating at desks. You need to be making sure that you're doing that in a designated area, a canteen or kitchen or whatnot. So letting them know whether or not there are any housekeeping rules and whatnot that you need to let people know. The use of your telephone system, so as daft as it sounds, so they have to press 0 for an external line and that sort of thing. The use of mobiles, can they use your phones for personal calls? What do they need to do with their own mobile phone? Are they allowed to have it on? Do they need to have it, locked away in a drawer? Every company is different. And I've included private mail on there because, some companies, the odd Amazon parcel might get delivered to the workplace, and sometimes that's okay, but, you will have your own stance. Next up is things like security and alarm procedures. So if they are going to be doing lock up or opening up or whatnot, what is the procedure for doing that? Do they get an ID card, pass, keys, a fob? What's the kind of the access? And accessibility to the office, if they are going to be the first one in, how do they get in? If they need to access the office out of hours, what's the procedure for that? You could then talk about education and training. So in terms of, do you offer the opportunity for people to be able to, do additional training or study for qualifications? Perhaps you fund that by way of a training agreement. What's your process for that? Is it subject to them having passed the probation or having been with the company for a certain length of time? Likewise, if you are employing somebody, maybe it's an apprentice or it's a trainee, that as part of their role, it comes with a study package, talking them through what that looks like. What time do they get to study? Do they get time off for their exams, and all of that process? And then probation. So like Liz mentioned, it could be 3 months, it could be 6 months, but just talking them through what that looks like. Do you want them to book the meetings in advance so that they're already there, they're in the diary? What's the paperwork? What should they expect as part of those meetings? Not quite finished with my my checklist just yet. I think we might run over, apologies. So a few policies that you might direct them to: your equal opportunities policy, disciplinary and grievance. These are your statutory policies, so you do legally need to have both of those. So directing them to those policies, letting them know about the harassment and bullying policy. You will also need to include sexual harassment within that policy. Email and internet. So again, as with the phones, do you allow personal use of their email account and, the odd, look on Facebook during the working hours, or is it solely just the emails are for business purposes only, and the internet, yes, you can go on Facebook, but it's in break times. And then your alcohol and drugs policy. I think the majority of companies, it probably is a zero tolerance approach. However, there will be roles within some businesses where, you might be going wining and dining clients, for example. So it might be accepted and appropriate that a glass of wine is had at lunch, but it's ultimately about what your stance is. Then it's the health and safety side of things. So, what your health and safety policies are, how they can be accessed, what the fire safety procedure is, who your fire marshals are, if you have a fire test weekly, when that is, so that they know when to expect that. If there are any accidents or near misses that need reporting, how it is they go about doing that. And if you do have a separate health and safety company or contact, perhaps sharing those details. And then for those of us that are office-based, carrying out that DSE risk assessment. And I would say as well, for those that work at home, that DSE risk assessment should also be completed. Obviously, you're not going to go around to their, kitchen table and carry it out. They can do it themselves, but still having that on file. And then obviously the tour of the offices and introduction to colleagues, which we've spoken about. So what I just want to cover off is, apologies, I should have just said actually, we do actually, as part of on our website, we do have checklists on there. So there is actually an induction checklist on there. It's free for you to download, so please feel free to have a look. But as we've said, the induction is that gateway to the business for all new employees. And we know that first impressions are of vital importance. So it begs the question, and we do see it, why so many businesses invest heavily in their recruitment process only to potentially mess things up in the first few days. We've heard horror stories of people being sent to the wrong place on the first day, nobody being there to greet them, or even people not even, well, I didn't know you were starting, wasn't expecting you. It really doesn't go down well. So just in summary, and to avoid those common pitfalls, starting the induction on the first day is the biggest pitfall ever. There is lost opportunity to engage before the start date. And as Liz mentioned, there is perhaps an increased chance of other offers in the interim coming up. If somebody has a 3-month notice period, yes, they may well have accepted a job with yourselves, but that's not to say that they are not still actively looking. So if you are not keeping them warm and ensuring that regular contact right up until the point that they arrive, potentially on day one, that person isn't going to turn up because they don't know whether or not they should still turn up because you've not kept in touch with them. Lack of structure and clarity. People like visibility. They want to know what that journey looks like. It sends quite a poor message if there isn't that kind of structured process. So having, like Liz said, a timetable, but one thing that you could consider doing is actually sending it to your new starter in advance. Some people don't like being put on the spot. They like things in advance. So if you can send a timetable, even as brief or as detailed as you like, to your new starter, just kind of saying, look, I appreciate that there'll be things on there that you don't have a clue what they mean, but just wanted to give you a heads up of what to expect within your first week. Another pitfall is lack of technology. I strongly think that ideally the induction should be delivered in person. However, I fully appreciate that, you know, locations, timings, whatnot, that isn't always the case. So it may be that as part of that induction program, you look at which elements are better delivered in person and which can be done online. And then finally, lack of consistency. You know, you want your induction delivered the same way every time, but also bear in mind who is going to be doing it. If you're involving lots of people in managing the induction, it can sometimes become quite confusing. So make sure it's planned and structured. Maybe one person could be, you know, overall responsible for each of those different sections. And I did actually see a question pop up before in terms of who's responsible, whether it's HR, whether it's the line manager. I think it's down to the business. I would say that there's probably, you know, it's maybe a bit 50-50. There will be elements of it where HR need to support the line manager in terms of pulling together an effective induction process, and there will be HR aspects of the timetable and the checklist. But ultimately, the individual is being brought in to work with a team leader or a manager and a team. So I believe that it should be the manager that leads on the kind of the day-to-day introduction and introducing people to the team and whatnot. But HR will certainly be expected to support that process. So in terms of us and how we can help, obviously there's a lot to take in there. You may already have an induction process, but maybe this is an opportunity now to take a step back, look at it in terms of, you know, its effectiveness, its fit, whether or not it's fit for purpose. We'd be more than happy to have a chat with you and to look at what you currently do and identify any areas for improvement. As well as the free checklist that I mentioned, we do actually have an onboarding package as well. That's just priced at £90 plus VAT, and you can purchase that on our website. And that does actually include, you know, an informal welcome letter, an induction plan, plus a 30-minute call with one of us to kind of discuss how your induction will look. But of course, if anybody would like to have a chat about anything, then you can get in touch with us or drop a comment in the chat box. So lots to consider there, I guess. But in summary, you know, that effective onboarding process, it does offer numerous benefits. You know, like Liz said, the buzzwords, you know, they are buzzwords, but they're buzzwords that matter. They've got that increased job satisfaction, that improved productivity. It's ultimately about making that new hire feel welcomed, making sure that they understand their role and how, you know, that bigger picture, how they fit into the company and their contribution. So that is it for today. Have we got any other questions? If anybody would like to pop them into the chat, I'll just have a quick look. I think it was possibly just the AI.
I think it was in the, I think it was in the Q&A. I think there's some.
Oh, was it the Q&A?
Questions in the Q&A part, if there are any more.
Yeah, so Anne asked about the tasks split between HR and manager, so hopefully answered that. But yeah, if anyone does have any questions, feel free to pop them in. If not, thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day. Apologies, we ran over by a whole 5 minutes. As always, we will send a copy of the slides and a recording of the webinar to you. So if there are no further questions, I'm going to politely throw you all out and end the meeting. Thank you all very much.
Take care.
Bye. Bye.